Welcome to Mimi Stories 256. Please like, subscribe, and comment. Like means support. Let's continue with our next chapter of The Price of Her Belonging. She slammed her hand down on the armrest of her chair for emphasis, the sound reverberating through the room. George stood frozen, beads of sweat forming on his brow. He was a man who commanded respect, someone whose mere glance sent powerful clients scrambling for compliance. Yet here, before his mother, he was reduced to a boy who could barely speak. Jenny stood off to the side, her small hands clutching at her dress, though her mind was far less troubled than her expression. She knew her grandmother's fury couldn't touch her. The old woman could rant and rave all she liked. Her parents had already given their word, and Jenny, clever as she was, only needed to look pitiful enough on the outside to get her way. "Mom," Evelyn ventured cautiously, her voice trembling. Jenny has been lonely for so long. This girl, Adoria, is the same age as her. They'll grow up together as sisters. It's what Jenny needs. "Quiet!" Adelaide barked, cutting Evelyn off with a venomous glare. Her tone dripped with condescension as she added, "Whose fault is it that the child is lonely? Perhaps if you'd been more competent, this wouldn't be an issue." George's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening as he struggled to contain his anger. But when he saw Evelyn's head bowing under the weight of the insult, something inside him snapped. His voice, usually measured and composed, erupted like thunder. "Mom!" he roared, his tone carrying a force that made even Adelaide flinch. Jenny, startled, felt her heart leap in her chest. She had never heard her father raise his voice like that. For the first time that evening, fear flickered in her wide eyes. George turned to the maids, his voice sharp but controlled now. "Take Jenny to her room," he commanded. The maids moved quickly, escorting the girl out of the room as she threw one last glance over her shoulder. The atmosphere in the mansion was suffocating, thick with unspoken words and the weight of clashing wills. Adelaide's gaze remained fixed on her son, her authority momentarily challenged but not yet defeated. George's roar had shattered the suffocating tension in the room, his voice reverberating like thunder. The air crackled with unease as Mrs. Adelaide recoiled slightly in her seat, the rare sight of her son's defiance stirring a flicker of shock in her stern eyes. For a fleeting moment, George regretted his outburst, his heart aching as he watched his formidable mother, the matriarch he so deeply respected, coil back into herself. But the sight of Evelyn, her head bowed, and her spirit crushed under Adelaide's cruel words, reignited his resolve. Taking a measured breath, George straightened his posture and turned to face his mother. His tone, though calmer now, carried an air of firm determination. "Mom," he began, his voice steady, "it wasn't right to speak to Evelyn like that. I'm the one who made this decision, and I stand by it. What happened in the past happened. We can't change it, and we shouldn't keep letting it define us." Adelaide narrowed her eyes, her lips pressing into a thin, disapproving line. But George didn't falter. He pressed on, his gaze unwavering. "This isn't just about Evelyn or me. This is about Jenny. She needs someone her age, a companion, a confidant. One day she'll take over the company, and she'll need to understand how to care for the people under her. This is an opportunity for her to grow. And Adoria is the perfect age to grow up alongside her. They'll share their childhoods, their dreams, and maybe even their secrets. The things Jenny can't bring herself to tell us." Adelaide scoffed, leaning back in her chair, her hands gripping the armrests like claws. "There are other options," she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. "Good, well-bred children in orphanages or respectable homes. We can find someone worthy of Jenny's companionship. Why does it have to be that insect from the gutters? Who knows what vile habits she's picked up from her circumstances? What if she corrupts my granddaughter with her behavior?" Evelyn flinched at Adelaide's sharp words, her cheeks pale. George clenched his fists, his patience waning. He took another step closer to his mother, his presence towering over her. "Mom," he said, his voice steady but cold, "we've already made the decision, and it's final. Adoria and Edith will be here tomorrow. We all agree that Jenny needs someone to grow up with, and this is the right choice for her. All I ask is that you respect that decision and that you go easy on them." Adelaide's eyes flashed with fury, but George didn't wait for her rebuttal. Turning sharply, he motioned to the maid standing silently by the door. "Take Evelyn to her room," he instructed. His voice softened as he glanced at his wife, who looked utterly drained. "She needs to rest." As the maid helped Evelyn to her feet, Adelaide's piercing gaze followed her daughter-in-law's every movement. With a disdainful humph, she finally rose as well, allowing another maid to assist her up to her quarters. But as she climbed the grand staircase, her mind was racing. "Let them come," she muttered under her breath, her tone icy with resolve. "But mark my words, I'll see to it they're gone before long." George stood alone in the room, the weight of the confrontation pressing heavily on his shoulders. He rubbed his temples, the tension refusing to ease. Though he had silenced his mother for now, he knew her well enough to recognize the war brewing behind her eyes. Still, he clung to the hope that Jenny's happiness, her future, would make it all worth it. The day passed in restless anticipation, and as the next morning dawned, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. The air was thick with tension, each person moving quietly as though afraid to disturb the charged atmosphere. Evelyn busied herself, giving precise instructions to the staff, organizing the room where Adoria and Edith would stay. Her words were calm and measured, but the tightness in her expression betrayed her own nerves. Meanwhile, Jenny dashed about, her excitement impossible to contain. She was surrounded by maids, eagerly sorting through a pile of her old clothes, tossing aside anything she didn't need. "This one is perfect for Rhea," she cried, holding up a dress with a wide grin. The maids smiled indulgently, caught up in her infectious enthusiasm. For Jenny, the promise of a new friend had turned this day into an adventure. But in the heart of the house, Grandmother Adelaide was a storm brewing. She paced her grand parlor, the sharp click of her heels echoing against the marble floors. "Filth," she muttered under her breath, glaring at the preparations underway. "Filth in my house." She gripped the back of a chair with iron fingers, her thoughts racing. She couldn't sit idle. She needed to be ready. "Let them come," she hissed to herself, her expression hard as stone. "I'll see that they don't stay." At the hospital, Edith and Adoria sat on the edge of their beds, their hands clasped tightly in their laps. The minutes dragged on, the promised car nowhere in sight. Anxiety settled over them like a heavy fog. Edith glanced at the clock for the 100th time, her hopes dwindling with each passing second. "It's almost midday," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Adoria clung to her mother's arm, her young face etched with worry. "Mama, do you think they changed their minds?" Edith hesitated, her throat tight. "No, darling," she said, though doubt gnawed at her heart. "They'll come. We just have to be patient." But as the minutes ticked by, their hopes began to crack. Just as Edith was about to rise, ready to accept the cruel reality that they may have been abandoned, a sharp knock came at the door. Both mother and daughter froze. "Come in," Edith called, her voice trembling. "Did the rich people lie to them?" Stay tuned to find out. Just a favor to ask, please like. A comment gives me more energy to continue posting and subscribe. Tell me whatever you think. It's an episode-based story. So tell me what you want to come next.